Nvidia is the last of the Magnificent Seven that has yet to report earnings. What's going on, guys? It's Ricky with TechBud Solutions. I'm going to make this video super short and sweet, and here's everything that you need to know before Nvidia reports earnings. I really hope that you learned something new, and if you do, please consider dropping a thumbs up and subscribing if you feel like I earned it. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So this is Nvidia's performance in the past year. You guys can see that from overall lows of the start of 2024, we started at $47 per share. That was after its stock split. And it now has hit highs of nearly $150 per share. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's up over 180% in just this year alone. Let me go ahead and double check. Yep, 200%. So a lot of people are raising their eyebrows. Obviously, Nvidia has been an extremely successful company this year. Will the hype continue? In the short term, it looks like it. Nvidia has one of the largest market caps from any company that's publicly traded, exceeding Apple's market cap of $3.4 trillion, and Nvidia coming in at $3.48 trillion. And this is why it's so significant. A lot of people like to ask the question, well, why does it matter what Nvidia is going to report earnings? Because, well, I'm not really invested in Nvidia. Because of Nvidia's market cap being so big and it influencing overall indexes such as the NASDAQ, S&P 500, and now possibly even the Dow Jones, right, as it now has been added. Its influence is not just, oh, okay, you're not invested in Nvidia, you shouldn't be affected if Nvidia doesn't report as good as what was expected. No, if Nvidia drops because of its market cap and because of its influence when it comes down to its exposure in all of these baskets of indexes such as S&P, NASDAQ, and Dow Jones, it could affect with the good and with the bad. So if Nvidia all of a sudden begins to skyrocket, you will most likely see that NASDAQ and S&P 500 also begin to uptick. If Nvidia, for some apparent reason, does not continue to rally and it begins to drop, you'll most likely see that NASDAQ and S&P 500 also will begin to sell off. And if your companies that you're invested in are a part of the NASDAQ and S&P 500, then yes, you will most likely see somewhat of a downturn in November. So the first thing is, what is the market's expectation? When it comes down to Nvidia reporting earnings, it's going to be this Wednesday after the market closes, meaning that you go through the entire trading day. And then once the market closes, it's going to report earnings, and then it has its earnings call. This is where the executives come together and they share about what has happened in the previous quarter and what's to come with the up and coming quarters. And this is where they can kind of give a little bit more details of guidance and forecasts. And that's what really investors, in my opinion, really like to pay attention to. When it comes down to November 20th, 2024, please make sure you add it to your calendar. The earnings per share expectation is 74 cents per share. The revenue expectation is $33.09 billion. Now, I really wanted to share this with you guys because it kind of breaks it all down of what has been the big focus for Nvidia. So stocks obviously began to skyrocket as Trump became the president-elect. Now, my concern with this is that they became so overbought that just like we saw down last week, we began to see somewhat of a downturn. That shouldn't come as much of a surprise because anything that rallies very aggressively in the short term tends to correct itself also in the short term just as quick. Now, just because there might be a downturn doesn't mean that you need a panic sell or markets are going to be crashing. It's not like that, especially when it comes down to Nvidia. I do have to give credit where it's due. It's one of the stocks that I would love to be invested in when it maybe pulls on back a little bit closer to that $100 price point, which I personally believe, and it's just my opinion, I do believe that it can get there. But in the short term, I do think that everything looks really good for Nvidia, so it might continue to uptick. So that is why I'm not in a rush personally to buy Nvidia right now. There's too much hype, and it's great for those that are currently invested at a really good price. For those that are not, I think it's a little bit more on the overbought side. And in the short term, again, I can still see some form of uptick, but again, I do see some kind of downturn in the up and coming future once that hype begins to fade. The thing that I really wanted to kind of bring to light is what the big focus is for Nvidia. So Nvidia, again, being one of the largest companies in the U.S. that's publicly traded, and the last company of the Magnificent Seven that has yet to report earnings, all eyes are in Nvidia. So do not be surprised if leading up to Wednesday, day if markets are a little bit slower, or possibly they begin to downturn because they're trying to de-risk, mitigate risk, meaning that there might just be a little uncertain about what Nvidia is going to report, but Nvidia has been as bulletproof as a company as it's ever been before. So we expect a similar story we expect a similar story to the last several quarters, with a beat and a raise of $2 billion range. So this is again by an analyst. And one thing that I quickly wanted to share with you is a big focus, right? When it comes down to them reporting earnings, it's not just their earnings and their earnings per share, it's also their guidance. And then also, depending on the company, there's specific focuses that investors are really trying to learn more about to see if more progress is being made. There's no question that, again, big tech companies are spending billions of dollars pouring into AI development. This is where Nvidia has been able to reap a lot of the benefit. So Curtis noted that the expectations have continued to creep higher as Nvidia shares have rallied more than 7% in the past month and are up more than 180% in this year alone. But Curtis believes that the stock will continue to work as Nvidia continues with its release of its latest AI chip, Blackwell. Blackwell has been a huge focus for Nvidia. Now, the question is demand going to continue to remain the same with all the advancements that are happening with Nvidia and with what's to come with Blackwell? That is the big focus for this quarterly earnings. Every single quarterly earnings, depending on the company, they have different focuses, kind of like when Google, a big focus for them is like cloud-based revenue or ad-based revenue. Again, every single company, depending on what its focus is and its niches in this market, investors and Wall Street really like to be micro-focused, not just on the overall company, but in specific areas that it's really showing a lot of signs of development or guidance has looked to be very good. If there's any signs of a slowdown or lower than expected guidance, that is what I'm here to remind you. We can talk about, how it's done in the past before. We can talk about earnings per share and revenue and what it's going to report. The biggest thing that I want to remind you is guidance. It's the thing that I noticed that every single time it could exceed earnings per share, it could exceed revenue. But guess what? If its guidance is lower than what is expected, then do not be surprised if we see a downturn. For those that do not understand what that means, is that this company, Nvidia, is going to be reporting earnings based off of its previous quarter, Q3 of 2024, on Wednesday. So that quarter's already over. What it's reporting is just stating the fact that, yes, we exceeded expectation, but guidance is of what's to come. Investors want to see that for Q4 of 2024 and maybe Q1 of 2025, that we have good forecasts for this up and coming year. And that is exactly what could excite a lot of investors to either buy more or stay invested. If guidance does not look good, I just want you to understand the psychology behind it. What do you think investors will then do, right? As Nvidia, is at pretty much all-time highs, you can't be surprised that it wouldn't take much for it to tip on over. This is not for me to instill fear in you, but this is just for you to be aware of the different moving levers when it comes down to a company reporting earnings. Nvidia has been an extremely successful company in 2024. And again, it wouldn't really surprise me if that hype continues. The last thing that I want to share with you is the concern about SMCI. I'm sure a lot of you guys heard, based off of what happened last week, SMCI was in the brinks of, getting delisted from the NASDAQ market. Right now, they've experienced a continuous downturn, and they make up about 9% of Nvidia's business, to an article that I read. 9% of Nvidia's business is a lot of money. So what happens if SMCI continues to fail and potentially gets delisted and or has to file for bankruptcy? Again, that's for a different story, but I just want you to be aware that that is a factor that maybe some investors are going to be paying attention to when it comes down to Nvidia reporting earnings for this quarter and also of what's to come for 2025. So I'll make sure that I keep you guys posted. I hope that I earned your thumbs up, and I hope to see you for our live trading session on Monday. For those that do not know, I trade live every single day, Monday through Friday, right when the market opens. If you ever want to tune on in, you can join for as little as $1 a day is what it breaks down to, and it's the second link in the description down below if you're ready to join right now. And yes, it's a one-time payment, lifetime access, and you can join now for as little as $1 a day. I hope to see you there. And like always, let's make sure that we end the year on a green note. Take care, team.